on this earth. A vision from here forward. Theodore Roosevelt was the first president to ride in a plane, submarine, car, and use a telephone. He dared and did where others wondered and worried. He also built the Panama Canal, which many said could not be done. The point is, he looked forward and was a man of action, shaping the future. That is how we must be thinking today. Almost 110 years ago, Teddy Roosevelt gave his famous Man in the Arena speech, where he said, "It is not the critic who counts, not the man who points out how the strong man stumbles, or where the doer of deeds could have done better. The credit belongs to the man who is actually in the arena, whose face is marred by dust and sweat and blood, who strives valiantly, who errs and comes short again and again, because there is no effort without error and shortcoming. But who does actually strive to do the deeds, who knows the great enthusiasms, the great devotions, who spends himself in a worthy cause, who at best knows in the end the triumph of high achievement, and who at the worst, if he fails, at least fails while daring greatly, so that his place shall never be with those cold and timid souls who know neither victory nor defeat."
Woo!
Historically, America has always dared greatly and been rewarded for our daring. We pioneered human space exploration, human space flight. These acts of daring did not come without sacrifice, including loss of astronauts, time, and resources, but they did deliver the future. America was not only the first, and today remains the only nation to land men on the moon. Those investments in daring return everything from satellite communications to artificial limbs, from fire equipment, solar cells, and insulin pump, Velcro to scratch resistant contact lenses, from plastics to iPhones and shock-absorbent running shoes. The polymers in our spacesuits now save lives in fire-resistant suits for firefighters, while space-based water filtration technology now saves lives in remote places around the Earth. And think of the other rewards from daring to go into space. Wireless headsets, smoke detectors, freeze-dried foods, yuck. Tiny, hardy cameras, air purifiers, memory foam, ear thermometers, airplane de-icing, endless computer innovations, and the list goes on and on. All because we dared. So where are we today? On the cusp of another era of daring? I hope so. We should encourage 4 big steps forward. And here they are. First, we need to think more internationally, creating synergies in space at the international level. Why not an alliance? For example, of the top international space agencies, including America, Europe, Russia, China, Japan, and perhaps others, with the top private sector leaders in an effort to get the best of all parties and get us back to the moon for good, and then on to Mars and beyond. Synergies take leadership and effort to create, and that also boils down to daring. It is time. Second, we should start thinking more about public-private partnerships in the United States. Getting daring public sector to match daring in the private sector, public and private. The way daring in the private sector picked up the baton and ran with it in what we call, started in Mercury, Gemini, and Apollo, and Shuttle. We get more done when we work together. Right now, we could use more innovation, a clearer memory of how we efficiently got to the moon, more reliance on synergies created by public-private effort. Third, we need to refocus ourselves on what works, on hard and fast goals, efficient ways to space, the moon, and Mars, not allowing waste, profiteering, or ego to get in the way of achievement. That was how Apollo worked. With the Soviets nipping at our feels. We got there first. We did not do that to make money, but to achieve a national goal. In my view, the military-industrial space complex often acts on the notion that more spending is better, more profit is the goal, and more time is just fine. These assumptions are all three wrong. Efficiency is better than just throwing more money and infrastructure at space. Profit is fine and a valuable motivator, but it is not the motivation that got us to the moon. That was the combination of national security, national pride, and higher purpose. Finally, time does matter. At almost 90, I can tell you time is a precious resource. Having good eyes is also. We have spent a lot of time over the past 40 years on wishful thinking. I think if you had every past moonwalker and Apollo astronaut here today, they would all say, enough wishful thinking. Let's get back to action. High national purpose, the moon and Mars. Fourth and last, we need to think more about space as the future. And that means turning our attention to the next steps in human spaceflight. There are still many unanswered questions about life support, radiation, re-entry speeds, returning from Mars, and how we establish a simple, cost-efficient, reusable, and increasingly routine infrastructure for human presence on the moon, Mars, and in space. An efficient cycling spacecraft continually in motion, moving by one and the other object. A transway in space to and from established inhabited destinations. My concern about preserving and enhancing institutional knowledge has caused me to set up the Human Spaceflight Institute in Texas, and increasing with nodes of participants, academic, and a few brainy folks that I'll select, in addition to myself. I hope around the nation and the world with academies, engineers, and astronauts, all doing what they can, the thinkers and the doers who will define our future, working together on expanding human presence in space. That is my wish for legacy. Where does that leave us? Where Theodore Roosevelt would be looking today for the future, he might, if alive today, be thinking about the first president to fly in space. Or perhaps just the first to watch humans set foot and stay on the moon, set foot and set up a camp on Mars. In all events, he would expect a great deal of this great nation, America, the world. And he would expect a great deal of all of us here today, which is why we should start to expect more of ourselves and make it happen. I have a few tidbits to toss out. These are not part of formal remarks, but I think they may be of interest to quite a few people. We have an item in our future called a gateway. A gateway is a barrier unless it is opened. If it just continues to go around, it's expensive to maintain, and it's not doing very much. To get there by 2024, we're going to start with a mini gateway. The fellow engineer said to me after I talked about my transorbit craft between low Earth orbit and lunar orbit, he said, you've just taken the gateway and you're moving it back and forth. And I said, yeah, sort of. But when it leaves Earth orbit, it takes the crew with it. And it gets to lunar orbit. And it meets up with the lander. And the new crew gets in the lander, the old crew gets out. Now they can talk to each other for a week or so before the old crew comes back with the Orion back, penetrates the atmosphere, lands on Earth. But the trans-orbit craft, consisting of support systems, parts of the initial gateway, the power propulsion element, and some of the other support items, it keeps going. And it gradually comes back with solar electric propulsion, saving fuel, so it gets back to Earth orbit for the next orbit that goes to the moon. It takes a while, maybe, to get back. Now, in a couple of years, I hope we develop a craft that goes to the moon, comes back, and we reuse it. It aero captures. It's a buzz craft. And when John starts telling me time to get off, it's time to bring up some other people and shut up about all these good things.